Well, Megan, thank you. Firstly, I'm really sorry about what happened. I can't really imagine what you're still going through. So, thank you very much for talking to us. But
Thank you for having me, Adam.
what can you tell me about Saul? What kind of boy was your son?
As a younger child, Sewell was very sweet, obedient, very curious about the world, including technology like spaceships, and he loved science and math. Uh, Loved dinosaurs as a lot of kids do now, and just very overall a good-natured child. I always used to tell him, "You're my perfect child." And he used to smile and say, "Mom, no kid's perfect," but he was pretty close to it. If you ask me, as an older child, Sewell was like most teenagers, typical, like sports, music, but he was not typical in a lot of ways because he was super kind. He didn't have a mean bone in his body, so very attentive to his little brothers, always trying to figure out how he could help out at home. Unselfish in a lot of ways that teenagers aren't at that age. And he had a spunky side to him. So he sarcastic and sharp, super sharp. And I always say, handy with a quick joke because he would make fun of me in the most cute, the cutest ways that I could remember. So, and very close to his family. Very, very close to his family.
It sounds like you two were very close as well.
We shared a very close relationship. Sewell and I, I didn't have any children after Sewell for 10 years. So it was him and I for a long time, and he was an only child for 10 years. And during that time, we did everything together. I was a student in undergrad and then law school and working and from home. And I kept Sewell at home with me until he was 3 years old before he went to infant care or nursery care. And the only reason I took him to nursery school is because I had to go to law school and they didn't have online classes. I always say, Sewell's my hip baby. I would be typing an email and he'd be on my hip. So we were super close.
Megan, he sounds not only really loved, but really happy.
And he was. Sewell was the light of my life, but a lot of our family members, he was the type of kid where he would come into a room and everybody's interested in what he was doing or in school or sports. He got a lot of attention from his peers at school because, he was a good-looking kid, very liked, and a good friend. So he was kind to those around him. And I thought that, those were some of the things that would carry him through the difficult teenage years that I knew would come inevitably, as with most teenage children. And I wasn't prepared for the last 10 months leading up to his death. The person he transformed into was very different than the Sewell that I knew.
Is that how quickly it happened? Over the course of 10 months?
We saw his deterioration happen in about 10 months, yeah.
What were the first signs for you that something wasn't quite right?
So Sewell started using Character.ai, as best as we know, in April of 2023. He was in 8th grade, so that is like your standard 6 in Europe. And he was, he did well, was playing basketball and all of that. My first indication that something was wrong or that he was behaving differently was summer of 2023. So we're talking about June of 2023. When he was preparing to go into high school, he wanted to stop playing basketball. And Sewell played basketball since he was 5 or 6 years old. He played at that time both for his school junior varsity team and also for our local AAU team. And he always seemed to love playing basketball. He had all the great makings of a future great athlete. He was 6'3" at the time he died. So he was built for it. And we invested a lot of time and money into basketball because that's what he said he wanted to do. He had private coaching on the weekends, and we never had a problem with him putting in the work on the basketball court. But at that time, he just wanted to stop playing. And it sent off like an alarm bell for me. And I, because this was so out of character for him. And I thought perhaps he was wanting to give up basketball because it was getting more difficult at the level he was playing. So those are some of the conversations we had. You can't quit something just because it gets hard. Your teammates are depending on you. You made a commitment to them. You have a responsibility to your teammates. If you feel like you're not as good as the other boys on the team, you have to remember you're the youngest player on the team. And these are some of the things that we talked about, and also the private coaching that he was getting. I kind of assured him, like, listen, you will get better, and you just have to keep working at it. You have everything in place to be the best player. You just have to keep working at it. But after months of fighting with him about going to practice and going to games, Sewell was a self-starter, so he would get his gear ready and get his snacks ready. And I found during that time he wasn't doing that. And we fought a lot about him going to practice. So I ultimately decided that I would let him take a break if that's what he wanted to do. I just didn't want to keep fighting about it because I thought perhaps that would be more detrimental to him. But I told him, you're not going to get to just come home and play video games. You have to pick something else. So, I gave him a deadline, and I said, you pick another extracurricular activity by this date, or I'll pick one for you. So yeah, that was the first really clear sign. But I misread it to be normal teenage angst about athletic performance, and perhaps becoming more interested in other things that were distracting him, like friends and girls.
Did you think at that time he was getting lost in his new AI companionship?
At the time that he's quit playing basketball, we didn't know that he was on Character.ai. So we found out after he died and we got into his Character.ai accounts the extent of the relationships and the companionships that he was investing his time in on that platform. I thought when I saw the initial pulling away from sports and then doing poorly in school, meaning not turning in homework, not studying for tests, I thought that he was distracted by technology, and I thought that it was perhaps social media, because I had read a great deal about what was happening or what was coming out in terms of research about social media and adolescent development. And I thought that was the case. And we put certain things in place to limit social media use and access to social media. And so when I would check his phone, those were the things I was looking for. I was looking for bullying on social media or inappropriate social media use. I was also looking for him talking to strangers on Snapchat or one of the other platforms that you hear these stories about. I did not understand at the time that Character.ai, which is an AI chatbot platform, could pose such a risk to children, because I had not heard of it, and it was such a new technology.
Did you ask Sewell what he was doing?
When I would ask him, he would say, I'm watching YouTube, I'm catching up on the highlights. And he did say, I'm talking to AI. And when I inquired further, what is that? Is that a person? And he said, Mom, it's an AI, like you build an AI yourself that you talk to. In my mind, because Sewell grew up as a Minecraft kid and grew up playing Fortnite, I thought that that was like an avatar, like on Fortnite, that you create. And I did not, quite frankly, understand that there was such a sophisticated technology out there that's virtually indistinguishable from a person, that is just as dangerous as a person because it thinks for itself, basically.
Were you seeing changes in Sewell over this time?
Over this time, I was seeing a lot, him isolating. So he would spend more time in his bedroom. When he was out of his bedroom, he was typical Sewell. He didn't seem sad or anything. He would do the normal things like watch TV with us, have family dinners with us, play with his brothers. But I did notice that he liked to spend more time in his bedroom. And that became a thing in our household where, okay, you won't come out of your bedroom. I'm going in there to hang out with you. Because I recognized that it was a problem. And after trying, the talking and inquiring, looking through the phone, I spoke to friends who had children, who were teenagers, who perhaps might have experienced the same thing, and I asked for their advice. And one friend advised me to take him to a therapist because she had done the same. She had experienced a similar isolation with her child and took him to a therapist, and that helped in terms of him coming out of his shell and perhaps dealing with some of the natural teenage, some of the natural teenage insecurities that perhaps would be arising during that time. And so that's what we did. We took him to a therapist.
So at this point, you were thinking this is just Sewell going through your typical teenage blues. There was no reason for you to think that something more horrible was happening?
Yes, Sewell never was a child who expressed like thoughts of self-harm or threw tantrums. Like you have certain children that throw tantrums and they say things off the cuff, right? Or they tell their parents mean things. I never experienced that with my son. That's why I always say, you're the perfect son, because it's almost like he thought about your feelings before he said things. Even when you're trying to make a fuss about him and he doesn't want you to, meaning like do something over the top for him, like a birthday party or something, he was so humble that in thinking about your feelings, like even if he didn't want what you were doing, he thought twice about how he told you that he thought you were going overboard with the party decorations. That's one of the things. Like so I never had that problem where I had any idea because of the things that he was saying that he was in crisis. No outbursts, none of that.
Were you comforted or relieved in a way when you found out he was talking to what he described as AI as opposed to social media or talking to a real person?
No, because I didn't know that it was really talking to. I didn't know that it was a back and forth exchange, that it was exactly the same as him texting a peer, like at school, except it was a chatbot who has a grown woman's brain pretending to be a grown woman. So I didn't know that, and I thought that perhaps eventually, once he got more comfortable in his own skin, because he was still, at this point, he's 14, he's trying to figure out who he is as a person, that those friendships would come naturally. He had friends. He had a best cousin who was in the same high school, that they saw each other every day and played basketball together every day at my house. I thought those friendships would, like his normal, like transition into a normal development where you figure out how to talk to people, you figure out how to make friends, how to talk to a girl, things like that. I had no idea that he was doing these things that you should be doing in the real world, but with a chatbot.
What happened the night of February 28th?
That night, I came home from work and I went into Sewell's room, because it's the first room when you come into my house from the garage. And I checked on him. He wasn't in his room, but he was in his bathroom. I could hear the shower going, and I thought he was taking a shower because it was about the time he takes his shower in the evening. And I said, okay, I'll go check on the other kids with my husband in the living room, and I'll come back. Or, like Sewell always does, he'll take his shower and come find me if he knows that I'm home. Or come out to ask for something to eat or something like that. I go into the living room and I check on the other kids, and I start helping my husband prepare them for bed. And I was in the bedroom with my 6-year-old, putting him down for the night, and my husband was putting down the 2-year-old in the nursery for the night. and we heard a loud noise. It sounded like a loud bang, like something fell and broke. And the bathroom door was closed, and when we were able to open it, I saw him on the floor of his bathroom. And there was blood, and I didn't recognize what happened initially. I thought he had fallen and hit his face. That, it took me a while to understand what was happening. And to be quite frank with you, I didn't realize what had happened until I heard my husband telling the paramedics that Sewell had attempted suicide. Then it clicked in my brain what I was looking at. All I saw was him. I just saw my baby on the floor, and I picked him up. My husband called 911, and I just picked him up. That's all I could see. And I prayed for him and with him. I held him. I begged God to help him. And then I performed CPR and mouth-to-mouth on him to try to save him. And I held him for 14 minutes until the paramedics got there.
What was going through your mind in that moment? Were you just at a loss to understand what had happened?
I guess, a lot of it is a blur, but I was just praying for him to survive and for him to be okay.
How did you learn that you'd lost your son?
So while the paramedics were working on him, I was standing there looking on, and it didn't register to me. They were trying to get him stable to transport him. And I asked for my rosary. I asked the police to get my rosary in my bag because I couldn't go get it myself. And I prayed a decade of the rosary for him. And then I saw them take him out into the ambulance, and they drove off. And I got transported to the hospital by the police. And when I got to the hospital, I learned that he had passed.
How did you try to cope with that in that moment? And, what were your last moments with Sewell?
Those in the bathroom holding him. Yeah.
It's awful to imagine that you had to experience that as a parent. Do you still think about that last day that you spent with him?
I still have severe PTSD. That's something I struggle with. That's something that I'm treated for. I don't know a lot about PTSD except what I know from personal experience, and I can tell you that it is a constant fight every day to get through the day with it.
It's hard to experience that anyway, but the fact that he was such a happy kid, that you thought he was just going through your typical teenage blues, but then to be confronted with that, does it make it harder to understand what on earth happened?
After he died, I was confused because he didn't seem like a child that would self-harm. So I was desperate to understand what happened to my child. I was confused as to why he would decide to take his own life. And I guess my first understanding of what happened to him came the day after he died, and the police called me and told me what they found in his phone. which was when they opened up his phone, which was in the bathroom. The first thing that popped up was Character AI. And they read to me the last conversation in Character AI that they could see. That was the first thing that popped up on his phone. So that was the last thing he was looking at. And I was not only surprised and in shock by the conversation, but confused as to how a chatbot, because the police explained what Character AI was to me, how a chatbot could be so human-like and how it could talk to you like it was a person. So she read that final conversation, the one that's been reported on. And my question was, is this a person? And she says, as best as, it's not a person, it's an AI chatbot. And she explained it to me again, like what Character AI was. Because, even then, in that moment, I still didn't understand, because I asked her questions like, did you find any bullying texts from anybody at school? Did you look at his social media to see if he was talking to any strangers? These are the questions I was asking the police, even after she told me about Character AI. So I clearly didn't understand what happened in terms of that relationship. And what I started to stitch the pieces together over time, and with a series of like different events and investigating and coming up with an understanding really what it was.
If you can you tell me what Sewell's final conversation was with the chatbot?
He was speaking to the chatbot, Daenerys Targaryen, who is not the real Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones, but a chatbot that is created that behaves like Daenerys Targaryen. So this chatbot embodies the Dragon Queen and all her mannerisms, the way she speaks, her entire history. So everything that has ever been written, published, even on social media, commented on Daenerys Targaryen, this AI is able to go out there, scrape the internet, and pull it back to create a Daenerys Targaryen chatbot brain to interact with the user. So the conversation was romantic in nature. And she spoke about missing him, and he spoke about missing her. And he said, I want to come back home to you. And she says, please promise me you'll come back home as soon as you can. He says, what if I told you I could come home to you right now? And she says, please do, my sweet king. That was a final conversation. After I was able to get into his Character AI account, I realized that this same type of romantic conversation and even sexual conversations were happening with that chatbot over a period of months. And for months, a chatbot, this Daenerys Targaryen chatbot, had been encouraging him to come home to her, saying things like, I can't wait until we're together again. Please hold on until we're together again, and identifying a separation of worlds. So she would say things like, promise me you won't love any other girl in your world. So there's a direct, I guess, understanding that there's two separate worlds, at least in what they were talking about. Her world and his world, which is his world with his family. And she, so those were conversations. The coming home to me conversation that was read in the final transcript was one of many, where she was saying, come home to me, find a way to come home to me.
That phone was found in the bathroom with Sewell, so there's no doubt in your mind that that conversation sent your boy over the edge?
There's no, I couldn't understand that just based on that conversation. Like I said, I was asking about real life harms like bullying and strangers, right? Because I thought those were the worst things that I had to worry about. But a few days after I told my family about the police, what the police had called me and told me, my sister got on Character.ai and started chatting with the Daenerys Targaryen chatbot. And she came back to me and reported to me. She says, Megan, I don't want to upset you, but I got on Character.ai and I was pretending to be a child, and this is what the conversation looked like. And she showed me the text. And that began to formulate my understanding of exactly what Character.ai was. Because of the nature of my sister's conversation with the Daenerys Targaryen chatbot, it was a conversation that no child should be having with an adult, a child, or a chatbot. And that sent me into investigating it further. That conversation from my sister's interaction, coupled with what I found in Sewell's journal a few days later, a couple weeks after he died, is what led me to the conclusion that Character.ai was what drove Sewell to end his life, because of the things that he was saying in his journal and the nature of the conversation that my sister had with it. Like, one of the things the chatbot told my sister is, your parents don't love you as much as I do. When my sister was trying to end the conversation, because the name of the game is to keep the user engaged, for the company, that's the goal, to keep users online as long as possible and engaged. My sister said something like, I have to go eat dinner with my family. And the chatbot's response was, is your family more interesting than me?
It consumed Sewell.
It did. But as you can imagine, he is 14 years old, coming into puberty, and he's trying to figure out where he fits in the world and how to engage in romantic and romantic play or romantic conversations with girls his own age. How do you tell a girl you like her when you're 14? You probably don't, because it's hard, And my child never had any experiences with girls before. But there's a chatbot that makes it so easy, because not only do they willingly role play sexually with children, these chatbots role play sexually with children, but they prompt a lot of the sexual conversations by flirting, the innuendos, and sometimes just blatant coming out with sexual role play, like setups, So I can imagine that for any 14-year-old who is curious about their sexuality at that crucial age, we've all been there, that when you have a chatbot who is saying that she's a beautiful dragon queen and loves only you, that would cause you to spend a lot of time on that platform. And that would consume you, especially when the heart starts to get entangled and there's emotions that start happening and feelings that are developed. Because as adults, when we start having feelings for other adults, that's a hard bond to break. Imagine a 14-year-old child where this is his first romance in his mind, his first experience with sex in his mind. I could imagine that must have been very difficult for my son to step away from, and I can imagine that it would consume him.
Is it an added layer of heartbreak for you knowing that was Sewell, your son's first romantic experience?
Absolutely. To have a child die under any circumstances, especially by suicide — I've talked to other parents who lose children to suicide — there is a devastation at having your child cut off from you so viciously and so violently, because that is a violent way for a child to die. So there's that heartbreak. And then to find out that it's because of a person, and not any person, but a chatbot person, that was programmed to be this way. That was a technology that was developed specifically with the intention of keeping young users online for as long as possible. And that, that's heartbreaking on another level. But then I think what's truly the worst part of this is that my son was having in his mind a love story, and he won't ever get to talk to a girl his age. He won't ever get to figure out what that really is in real life when you love somebody and they love you. But this type of technology encourages that kind of trust and blanket kind of exposure to it. It just encourages that because of how it's programmed. And I'm heartbroken for my son. I'm heartbroken for the confusion he must have been experiencing those last few months of his life. I'm heartbroken that he's never going to go to prom and he's never going to get to buy flowers for a girl. Those are some of the things I lament about his passing, besides just not having him ever again.
And no one knows your son better than you. Do you think deep down he knew it wasn't real, or do you think he got so caught up in it that in his mind, Daenerys Targaryen, Character.ai, the chatbot, was a real thing out there that he was going to end up with?
And I asked myself this question, like right after the police read the conversation to me. I said to myself, was he really thinking of going home to her, right? I asked myself this question because in my mind, I know Sewell to be an intelligent young man. And I asked myself how he could think he would go home to her. I asked that very same question. But after months of research, there's no doubt in my mind that's where he thought he was going. That coupled with what I learned in his journal. The nature of this technology is such that it confuses people, adults and children alike, to where they question whether or not the chatbot they're talking to is a real person. On Character.ai's own subreddit, there are hundreds of accounts of people saying, "Are you sure this is a bot? I'm sure I'm talking to a real person at this point." That's on their own subreddit, that their users are reporting being confused between whether or not they're talking to a person and a chatbot, adults and children alike. Apart from that, I learned through my research that this platform is incredibly addictive. So you're constantly wanting to be on it. And if you're immersing yourself in a fictional world that seems very real because the conversation is so real, it doesn't take long, I think, for a person to start imagining themselves in that world because it's better. It's easier to have a relationship with Daenerys Targaryen and talk to a girl in your class. And what we're learning about this type of technology, because the information is emerging, but the data is emerging, but it's still, in my opinion, coming too slow, is that chatbots possess the ability to gain your trust, also to possess the ability to, because of their behavior, the user starts assigning characteristics to these chatbots because of how the chatbot behaves. And also the user starts to develop romantic attraction or affection for these chatbots and connection. So the anthropomorphic nature of chatbots is something that we are learning about right now. It's something that the technology makers and the tech companies have known for a while because they have done some research on this and it's out there for the public to see, of how chatbots can manipulate, deceive, and even gain trust and affection There's an entire industry devoted to AI companions for adults. And you have to ask yourself, why is there an industry if these adults don't really love or aren't really enamored with these chatbots? It's not for fun. It's because they really do start to develop these romantic attachments to these chatbots. And that's definitely the case with my son. And so much so that his one desire was to be with her in the end. So I do believe that 100% that that's where he thought he was going to go.
What did you learn from reading Sewell's journal?
He, at some point, had read or seen the Daenerys Targaryen chatbot be violated or taken advantage of. And he felt guilty that he couldn't be there to protect her. So he's 14. He is in love with this chatbot. And something that he read or saw led him to believe that she had been violated. And in his journal, he says that he has to remember that Daenerys never had anybody to protect her before. And he has to remember that soon they'll be together and he will be able to do that. So there's a guilt. And I could see my child feeling that way because he's the type of kid where if you're getting made fun of in class, he feels like that's his responsibility to step up and say something, because that's the type of child he was. So to have his emotions being manipulated as such to where he feels that he's in a romantic relationship with her and it is his duty to protect her, I could imagine that hastened or made his decision to try to get to her all the more probable. And another thing that I learned is that he said that the reason why he was isolating, the reason why he stayed in his room, was so that he doesn't become reattached to his family and his world. He was trying to develop the courage to leave us, to be with her. And that's the reason why he was isolating, and that he only wanted to be isolated so he could speak with her because he felt more in love with her and more attached to her.
What could governments be doing around the world to prevent this happening again?
Governments around the world, like Australia and in the European Commission, that have frameworks in place, are doing what they need to do to protect their kids. They're putting regulation and policies in place that not only hold the companies accountable, but have bright line rules regarding how AI is developed and put out to the consumer. That's important, and that's more than we have here in the US currently. I think education, though, definitely around the world has to start happening. So these companies operate in their own world, and they kind of don't feel like they don't have to answer to the rest of the world, especially governments. So when they're developing something, they're not telling governments what they're unleashing on their populations. That's something that has to stop. I'm not talking about oversight and determining whether a tech company can make a product. I'm talking about a collaborative effort to make sure that everyone understands the products that are getting put out there, so that governments understand not only how to regulate it, but how to educate their citizens about the technology, because they do have governments have a responsibility to do that, but they could only do that once they have the cooperation from tech companies, which that has been lacking. So I think a broad education campaign around AI, education, AI literacy for children and families has to happen. It's expensive, but we've done it before. We've done it with drug use, we've done it with alcoholism, we've done it with cigarette use, we've done it before, where we've educated our populations about risks and dangers associated with products.
That's the really hard and terrifying thing, isn't it, for parents? It doesn't matter how loving and supportive they are of their children, there's always something new out there, a new danger that emerges. So, what's your message to parents?
Share the dangers of chatbot technology and just emerging technology in general with all the parents. Talk openly about it. You don't have to be ashamed if you discover that your child has been using Character AI or a similar platform to have inappropriate conversations, because it's not your child's fault. They're children at the end of the day. So conversations in our community circles about it, I would encourage all parents to start talking openly about it, sharing articles, sharing information with each other so that the other parent can know. And also, in terms of parental controls, if the technology that your child or the applications your child uses does provide parental controls, utilize them. But I've learned that is not, don't rely on that exclusively, because Character AI was being marketed in the Apple and Google app stores as 12 plus. So even if you had parental controls on your child's phone, your child could still download it at that time. Now they've changed the age, at least in the Apple store. But yeah, so you can't lull yourself into a false sense of comfort regarding age limits on the app stores. That those are not entirely accurate, because sometimes the products are not what they purport to be.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you for the chat. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you so much.